I told you I'd be coming up with one before the combine, and here it is. In the description box down below is the link to my most recent pre-combine, no trade, 3-round 2014 NFL mock draft. Go ahead and click on that link down there and view it. And come back on the video and let me know what you think of it. Or you could sit there and look at it as I'm talking here. Now, some things that I notice about this 2014 NFL draft class, I think this is a really good class for quarterbacks, a really good class, a really good class for wide receivers, a really good class for offensive tackles. And I think it's one of these things that probably a really good class for 3-4 outside linebackers as well. The point I'm getting at here is if you're a team that has needs or multiple needs in these different position areas, if you don't get your guy in the first round, chances are you could find some quality impact players later on in the draft, so you shouldn't panic, especially when it comes to positions like wide receiver. That is, to me, the premier position in this 2014 NFL draft. You have stars in the first round, and you have some other guys in rounds 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 that could be very productive NFL starters for a long time to come. Now, in terms of this mock draft, I've got some big risers, and I've got some big fallers. Let's look at the risers first. Khalil Mack, the outside linebacker from Buffalo. In my opinion, at this moment, the best defensive prospect in this 2014 NFL draft, not Jadeveon Clowney. I'm sorry, when you have like 3.5 sacks, you cannot be rated, in my opinion, as the best defensive prospect in the draft. And bottom line is I think Khalil Mack is a better all-around player. I think he provides more positional value and positional flexibility. He could play weak side or strong side in a 4-3. Hell, some teams might think he could play middle linebacker in a 4-3. Other teams are going to sit there and look at him as a 3-4 outside rush backer. Some teams might think he could play inside in a 3-4. Some teams might even sit there and think he's big enough, and if he puts on a few pounds, he could sit there and play defensive end in a 4-3 cover 2 scheme. I love Khalil Mack. You know, you watch his game against Ohio State, you knew that he's a big-time player that can make some big-time plays, and he did that a lot at Buffalo this year. Aaron Donald, the defensive tackle from Pittsburgh. This guy is a freak. I do not care if he's not 6'4" and 310 or 315 pounds. The guy is a monster. Absolute monster. An athletic specimen. Me, if I'm looking at somebody that could play defensive tackle in my 4-3, or maybe end in my 3-4, or even better, maybe even end in my 4-3 scheme, I want Aaron Donald. And I've got him going very high in this draft and to the perfect team in the sense that he will test off the charts at the combine. You know, he tested off the charts at the Senior Bowl. A certain team out in California is going to fall in love with them. I'd be surprised if it didn't happen that way. Coney Ely, the defensive end from Missouri. He's the number 2 prospect at his position in this draft behind Jadeveon Clowney. Now, there's a bit of a gap between Jadeveon Clowney and Coney Ely. That is true. But with Coney Ely being the second best defensive end prospect in this draft, that could potentially artificially inflate his draft stock to the point where he could even get some top 10 consideration, which is where I have him going right now. And when you look at him, some teams are also going to value him because they feel with his size, not only could he play end in a 4-3 on rundowns and certain pass rush downs, they feel that maybe he could flip inside and play some defensive tackle, maybe as a 3 technique on pass rush downs in a 4-3, or they might feel he bulks up a little bit. He's a good enough talent where you could play him 3-4 as a defensive end. So that, with that positional value, that is so key to inflating some of these guys' draft stock. Zach Martin, again, another guy, positional depth, and not so much positional depth, but positional versatility and flexibility. Some teams are going to look at him coming out of Notre Dame as a left tackle. Some teams will look at him as a right tackle. Some teams will look at him as a left guard. Some teams will look at him as a right guard. But in an offensive lineman class that is pretty good at the top and not so good after that, you look at this guy here and you see a guy that with that positional versatility and flexibility, he's probably going to be a top 20 pick. Somebody's going to maybe view him as a left guard for a decade. They'll take him in the top 20. Somebody's going to view him as a left tackle for the next decade. They might take him in the top 20, top 15. Hell, you never know. Stranger things have happened. Odell Beckham Jr., the wide receiver from LSU. I see some Deshaun Jackson in him. I see some Kendall Wright, but a little more explosive Kendall Wright in him. He's going to test off the charts of the combine. He's going to probably post a 4.33, a 4.35, and with his ability to make big plays in the passing game, line up outside with also being able to line up in the slot, and the impact and value that he brings to your team on the special team side of the ball as a return specialist. Right now, I have Odell Beckham Jr. going number 18 to the New York Jets, which is probably higher than most people have him. And I would not be surprised to see as the draft process goes along, post a monster 40 time and works out well for these teams at the combine and at the pro day and individual workouts. He's going to start rising, and he might be the number 2 or number 3 wide receiver taken in this entire draft class. Morgan Moses, the offensive tackle from Virginia, as guys like Cyrus Quandizio drop down a little bit. He's a guy that could go right in there late in the first round because somebody's going to look at him to play right tackle right away and maybe left tackle down the road. D Ford, the outside linebacker from Auburn, he's an athletic freak. He's got great potential as a 3-4 edge rusher, and somebody late in the first round is going to gamble on that athletic upside and view him as being worth a first-round pick. Now we go to the flip side, the fallers. Teddy Bridgewater from Louisville. I don't agree with this, but I could envision it happening. Some teams are going to sit there and look at him and say, well, he doesn't have the biggest frame. Some teams are going to question his level of competition. Some teams are going to look at him and they're going to maybe see Geno Smith. I personally don't. Like I said, I don't agree with it. I don't envision him falling all that far, but it would not surprise me to see him fall all the way to number 8 to the Minnesota Vikings, which is where I have him going at this time. Jake Matthews, the offensive tackle from Texas A&M, he's another guy that I think is going to fall a little bit. Not a lot, but outside of the top 10 right now, I have him going to the Tennessee Titans at number 11, and hey, it wouldn't be a bad situation for him to go there under Ken Whisenhunt. But the thing is that he played right tackle for a couple of years while Jokel was there at A&M playing left tackle. Now he flipped over to the left side. And I think what's going to happen is some teams start watching more film on Jake Matthews. They're going to realize that, yeah, he's not a terrible prospect, and he's a very good offensive tackle prospect, but he's not the best prospect on film. And they're going to realize how many times Johnny Manziel made him look a whole hell of a lot better than he really was because of his ability to scramble. C.J. Mosley, the inside linebacker from Alabama, frankly, I do like him, but I think he had a better 2012 season than 2013 season in terms of how he looks when you watch him. It seemed like he was weighed down too much by what Saban and that defense at Alabama were expecting him to do in 2013. If you could get him with a team, maybe initially, where he's just allowed to read, react, and go play instead of having to overthink and analyze everything, then he's probably going to be a very successful inside linebacker for a long time. Some people are going to sit there and say, well, with guys like Kuechly and so on and so forth, you're going to see a guy like C.J. Mosley have his draft stock increase. I look on the flip side, middle linebacker isn't that important of a position to a lot of NFL teams. So as a result, you could see his draft stock drop. Anthony Barr, the outside linebacker / defensive end from UCLA, I see it where he could be a stud, but he's got a ways to go. And I think what's going to happen as the draft process goes along, and you've got Jadeveon Clowney, you've got Khalil Mack, and you've got D Ford, people are going to start looking at Anthony Barr's film more closely, and they're going to say, ooh, with all that athleticism, we maybe would have expected more out of him. He's got a lot of work to do. He's got a long ways to go. And I don't envision at this point, again, with guys like Clowney and Mack and, even like an Ely or a D Ford, he's going to fall, a little bit lower on the outside edge rusher pecking order than people anticipate at this point in time. It would not surprise me at all to see him drop out of the first round entirely. Right now, I think I've got him going 25th to San Diego. And you say, well, Schlegdaddy, you're an idiot. Well, every year you see this, guys that are supposed to be the number 1 picks or top 5 picks end up dropping into the second or third round. See Michael Johnson, see Daquan Bowers, see Demontre Moore last year. Remember, a lot of people were projecting him to go number 1 or number 2, and he ended up going in the third round of the New York Giants. I'm just saying. Lewis Nix, the defensive tackle from Notre Dame, I've got him going to the Patriots at 29. I think he's the, heir to the throne of Vince Wilfork in the interior of that Patriots defense. He's a Vince Wilfork in a lot of ways, and I anticipate some dropping down the draft board similar to Wilfork in that 2004 draft. When you look at Nix, you see a guy with a load of potential, but he is coming off of a somewhat major injury, so that maybe will raise a medical red flag for some teams as they're going through the draft process. So, like I said, I've got my mock draft. The link is in the description box down below. Go check it out. Go rate it there on walterfootball.com. Tell them to feature my mock draft, damn it. 3 rounds, no trades. After you read it, let me know what you think of it. If you've got any questions about any particular prospects or what I think your team is going to do, or you want to say anything about what I've got your team doing, feel free to share it down below. Now, my next mock draft is going to be fun because I'm going to do a 1-round Matt Millen draft. I'm sure everybody that's a football fan, even, yes, Detroit fans, will appreciate that. I'm going to have a lot of fun doing that Matt Millen mock draft, and I hope you guys have a lot of fun looking at it. So, again, check out my most recent mock draft in the description box below.